Welcome back, everyone. This is the continuation of my Star Wars Unlimited Jump to Lightspeed card review series. This is the series where I'm rating every single Jump to Lightspeed card from 1 star to 5 stars. This is the Aggression Hero version of the list. The star ratings are, so 5 stars are cards that are like really meta defining. 4 stars are great cards. These are cards you're going to see like as staples in a lot of decks. 3-star cards are just good cards. They're going to come and go depending on counters and like how the meta shapes out. 2-star cards are just like really niche cards or cards people are just going to try out and eventually drop because they're not as good as we thought. And 1-star cards. These are just bad cards. On to the card reviews. First up is BB-8 Happy Beeps. He's a 1-cost 1/4 vanilla unit with a piloting ability that when he's played as an upgrade, you may pay 2 extra resources to ready a resistance unit, and he's a +1/+2. He's not really that great in Wedge because even though he's a free +1/+2, are you really going to be running a lot of resistance units? I don't think so. The other issue with BB-8 is he only readies resistance units. And like I've said, I'm not sure how many great resistance units there's going to be. You have the 3 pos, set 2, the unit from this set, and the leader from this set. Those are all really good to ready, except the set 4 po unit. If he goes to pilot the X-Wing that he creates, that is no longer a resistance unit. So the combo there would be you would have to play po on the ground, spawn the X-Wing token in the air, and then play BB-8 onto that X-Wing token to ready your ground resistance po. One of the cards coming up, the Tactical Heavy Bomber, would be pretty good to ready, especially if you attach BB-8 to the bomber, because you can play the bomber, then attach BB-8 to it to ready it on the same turn. That would be good, except that's a total of 8 resources. And so are you really going to pay 8 resources for a 4/7? I don't think so. You might think, well, if you're running him in a Po deck, he could be good. And I don't really agree, because not only do you need a good resistance unit out that you would want to ready, you also need a vehicle out that you would want BB-8 to pilot, as well as 3 resources. So that way you can play it and then ready whatever resistance unit you have out. And if you already have a vehicle, if you already have a leader out or a good unit out like Po, and you want to ready it and you have the 3 resources to ready it, aren't you already winning at that point? Yes, it could be like the final little bit of burst damage. If you're running BB-8 in an aggro deck where you need the burst damage, are you really going to be running that many resistance cards? Currently, I think they only really run Po. So currently, as it stands, in set 4, I don't think BB-8 is going to see any play. I think people are going to try him. I just don't see where we have a critical mass of resistance cards yet. Again, this is one of those cards in the next 2 years. Keep an eye out. If we get more and more good resistance cards, we already have some pretty good resistance leaders. BB-8 could see play. So I think BB-8 is a 2-star card because I think a lot of people are going to try to get his readying ability off, and then they're going to realize that we have better readying events already, and then eventually cut him from their decks. So BB-8 is a 2-star card. Next up is Massassi Tactical Officer. Is a 1-cost 0/4 rebel and gets the action if you exhaust him, you can attack with a fighter unit. It gets +2/+0 this attack. The idea with this card, I guess, would be to play a really aggressive hero deck where you can play Massassi Tactical Officer and a fighter on turn 1. So then on turn 2, you get the +2 attack on the fighter, and you get to attack with it, so you get an action sheet, which is like kind of nice. The problem with that is there's only 3 1-cost fighters, and only one of those fighters is like good. So realistically, that's not happening. Now the play pattern is you play this on turn 1. On turn 2, you would play a 3-cost vehicle, and then on turn 3, you would be able to attack with it and get +2 attack if Massassi Tactical Officer is still alive. My question is, why would you not just play like Sabine in this color? Because Sabine on turn 2 would get 3 damage in, and then on turn 3 would get another 3 damage. So you get 6 damage instead of waiting 2 turns to add 2 damage to combo with a fighter that you might not even draw. Massassi Tactical Officer is just bad. I really thought like maybe they gave us a bunch of 1-drop fighters and then like you could realistically argue that this could see play. It can't. Bad card, 1 star. The next card, Black 1. 2-cost 2/3 resistance vehicle fighter. With the text, while this unit is upgraded, it gets +1/+0, and then it has a conditional on attack ability if you control Po as a leader, unit, or upgrade, so typically a leader, you get to deal 1 damage to a unit. The problem with Black 1 is you have Green Squadron Y-Wing, which is a 1/3 raid 2. So it already has the 3 health, which is the important part of the stat. And if it can attack, it deals 1 more damage than Black 1 does. So this doesn't fit into the current Sabine shell because it's also not a rebel. And you can't get buffed by Fleet Lieutenant, it can't get buffed by Wing Leader and all the rebel cards. Where this will see play is in a Poe leader deck, because this unit is really, really good with Poe. The little buff of dealing 1 damage to a unit is nice, but you have a reliable 1-cost pilot on turn 2 that you can pilot Black 1 with, attack with it, and then it would be 5 damage to base, which is really, really good. And then if you're lucky enough to have eject, you could eject Poe onto the ground, and now you have a 2/3 in space and you have Poe on the ground. So this is a nice card in a Poe deck, but it probably realistically only sees play in a Poe deck. You could already run Alliance X-Wing, which is a 2/3 rebel vehicle fighter. That only saw play in Sabine Yellow because it was just another rebel 1-drop that Sabine could play because they were really hurting for rebel 1-drops. In Poe, fine card, 3 stars. Anywhere else, probably not seeing play. Next up is Frisk, a 2-cost 3/2 New Republic pilot with the piloting effect for 2 resources, and played as an upgrade. You may defeat an upgrade that costs 2 or less. So the notable upgrades that Frisk could destroy when he's played as a pilot are experience tokens, shield tokens, Frisk himself if your opponent's playing Frisk. Entrenched is a big one, and DL-44 Blaster, but realistically, the issue with DL-44 Blaster is when played, it attacks. So it already kind of got its value, and you'd much rather kill the unit it's attached to. So the +2/+2 is nice on his piloting side. The defeating an upgrade that costs 2 or less is just okay. One thing to also know is if your opponent plays like IG-88 as a pilot, IG-88 itself costs 5, even though its piloting effect only costs 2. The card itself costs 5. So Frisk would not be able to defeat IG-88. And there's more examples like that. And I mean, playing Frisk as a 2/3/2 is not terrible. The problems with Frisk is there's already a lot of 2-cost 3/2s that Red Hero has access to. That's problem 1. Problem 2, he can only defeat very specific upgrades. And he can only defeat those upgrades if you have a vehicle for him to pilot. And he's not really going to be able to counter the most prevalent upgrades that are going to see play. And he has bad traits. Red Hero also has access to like disabling Fang Fighter. So on turn 3, when you have 3 resources, you could either play Frisk to maybe defeat an upgrade, or you can play disabling Fang Fighter, defeat any upgrade, and then you also got a 3/2 unit that's not going to be able to be 2 for 1 if they just like Power of the Dark Side the unit that you pilot Frisk with. I can see a world where like maybe people start running like 1 or 2 Frisks just to counter things like Entrenched, but I don't really see it. I'm gonna give Frisk like 2 stars. He's just really too niche for me to like him anymore. Next up is Red Squadron Y-Wing. 2-cost 1/3 rebel vehicle fighter with an on attack deal 3 indirect damage to the defending player. So this is a worse Green Squadron A-Wing. This also really reminds me of Gray Squadron Y-Wing, which was also a 2-cost 1/3 rebel vehicle fighter, so same traits, same stats. With an on attack, an opponent chooses a unit or base that they control and deal 2 damage to it. So like in a way, that was almost like 2 indirect damage. This is like adding 1 more indirect damage. So when you deal 3 indirect damage, if you attack base with this, realistically your opponent's gonna put like 2 of the indirect damage on their unit and 1 indirect damage on their base. So this is like a 2/3. There's really no indirect damage synergy in Red Hero. So I really just don't, I think this is already outclassed. Unfortunately, I think this card just is a 1-star card. We already have something almost exactly the same as this and it doesn't see play, so why would this see play? So next up is Biggs Darklighter. He's a 3-cost 3/4 with the piloting ability. You can pay 1 and then you get 3 effects based on what the trait of the vehicle that you put him on. So if it's a speeder, it gains +2/+1 in grit. If it's a transport, it gets +2/+2. And if it's a fighter, it gets +2/+1 in overwhelm. And you might be thinking to yourself, oh, that's really cool. Depending on what you have, he's like very flexible and can do a lot of cool things. I went to look at speeders, and there's not that many speeders in the game, and almost none of them really see play. So kind of scratch that bottom line out. Then I went and looked at transports. A lot of these transports are like 4 health. If you were to put Biggs on them, that would put them at 6 health. Which is a really big break point because that gets them out of takedown range. And then I went to actually look at the transports. And essentially in Hero, there are really only like 3 good, 3 resource, 4 health transports. And the reason I'm focusing in on 3 resources is because you could play your transport and then you can play Biggs on top of it as your first action next turn. You can kind of dodge takedown. 2 of those are in yellow. 1 of those is the set 4 Falcon, so any hero deck can run it. I don't think that the transport line is also going to be that relevant, so I would just scratch that out. Essentially, Biggs comes down to piloting for 1, a fighter gets +2, +1 and overwhelm. And you might be saying, are you excited to run that? Well, in yellow, we have Dagger Squadron Pilot, which is a 1 cost 2/1 for a piloting 1 cost, give +2/+1 to a unit. It's essentially a Dagger Squadron Pilot that also gives overwhelm, but realistically, your fighters are only going to have, what, 5 attack after you put Biggs on them. They're going to trade into a 3 or 4 health unit, so it does like 2 overwhelm damage. That's not that exciting. Let's just be fair here. Biggs can also be played as a 3/4 unit for 3. Except in Red Hero, we already have like Cassian Andor, which is a 3 cost 3/5 with a really great smuggle ability. And I don't think his piloting side makes me want to run him like over Cassian or with Cassian. I think we have better 3 drops in whenever you're going to be running Red Hero. So you might be asking yourself, why don't you play this in Wedge? Because then it would be a free +2/+1 overwhelm. And I agree with you. Except Biggs is the only good pilot in Red Hero. And you're going to be wanting to play a lot of pilots in Wedge, so I just don't see Wedge playing red. It just doesn't make sense to me. The last thing I'll say about Biggs is he's a 1-star card right now. If we get more transports, speeders, and fighters, Biggs has a really good chance of like being this really flexible unit. We can start actually considering the transport and speeder text of his text box. Right now, Biggs, 1-star card with a lot of room in the future to grow. Next up is Red 5. It's a 3 cost, 3/4 rebel vehicle fighter that has the on attack ability, can deal 2 damage to a damaged unit. This is a 3 cost spaceship with 4 health. Currently Sabine is running Red 3, which is a 3 cost 3/3, but also gives raid 1 to all of your heroism units. The problem with Red 3 is that it easily gets traded into by turn 1 plays, and it's like really fragile. Red 5 has that 4 health threshold, so it's a little bit harder to kill. And a cool thing about Red 5 is a lot of times your opponent is going to try and value trade into your own units. So if they like value trade into your Green Squadron Y-Wing and you have Red 5, you can then attack with Red 5, you can hit base with it, and then deal 2 damage to whatever traded into your Red Squadron Y-Wing and kill it. So it can kind of like kill a unit and hit base, which is really damn good in aggro decks. Being able to kind of like take care of their units that are value trading into you while pushing damage to face is really good. It's a rebel, so it gets all of the buffs from the rebel cards that Sabine already runs. That's really good. A lot of times people play Red 3 and then it's immediately answered. And like Red 3, if you play Red 3 down and get like 1 or 2 attacks off with other units, that's only 2 damage, like 2 extra damage that you're pushing. Red 5, if it survives 1 hit and then attacks, that's 3 extra damage. Now, yes, I know that you can play Red 3 down and that damage that's spread like is faster than Red 5's damage. So I don't know if Red 3 gets completely replaced by Red 5. But I do think you might start seeing Red 5s creep in, and maybe in some deck lists even start completely erasing Red 3s from the list. He's also really good in Luke, because in Luke, you know, you attack, his leader ability allows him to, if you have attacked with a fighter, you can deal 1 damage to a unit, and now they have damaged units, so now the next time Red 5 attacks, it can deal 2 damage. Whenever you attach Luke to Red 5, now Red 5 has 2 on attack abilities. And you can choose Luke's ability first, which is dealing 3 damage to a unit, and then Red 5's ability of dealing 2 damage to a damaged unit. So this can deal 5 damage with an on-attack ability and run 7 damage into base. So that's insane. I think Red 5 is a solid 4-star card. It's solid in a bunch of decks and really good in Luke. And if Luke starts seeing a lot of play, then, you know, Red 5 is going to be a menace. Red 5, 4 stars. All right, Tactical Heavy Bomber, 5 cost, 3/5, resistance vehicle transport. On attack, deal indirect damage equal to this unit's power to the defending player, and if a base is damaged this way, you get a draw card. The 2 problems with this card: 1, it's a 5 cost, 3/5, so it's pretty low stats. When you play it, it doesn't do anything, and its on attack ability is just okay. If you attack and you haven't upgraded this at all, it deals 3 indirect damage. I didn't think the indirect damage was great on the Y-Wing. I don't think it's great here. So this is like a prime candidate to be upgraded with a leader. But is this really the vehicle you want to throw your leader on? I don't think so. It's also resistance, not rebel, a worse trait. It is a transport, but that's also not really that relevant in hero. Also, it's a 5 cost, 5 health unit, so you could play this and then instantly get takedowned. I just really don't see it. It's a little too slow for me and just dies to removal. I really want something that when I play it, it does a really, really good effect at this stage of the game. So Tactical Heavy Bomber to me is just a 1-star card. I know people are going to probably try it out. The indirect damage support just isn't there for hero. So next up is Rebellious Hammerhead. It's a 6 cost, 5/7 Rebel Vehicle Capital Ship. When played, you may deal damage to a unit equal to the number of cards in your hand. Initially, when I was looking at this card, I thought it was terrible, because why do you want to play a 6 cost 5/7, deal like 2 to 3 damage to a unit? And then I thought to myself, it can be ECL'd, and it's a rebel, so it does somewhat fit into a Sabine shell. And you might be thinking, well, Sabine already has its top end. It plays Wreckers and it plays Poe. And you're correct. But what if we want to ECL something in space? If you're playing against a Django and they play Ruthless Raider out, you can ECL Rebellious Hammerhead. As long as you have one other card in hand, Rebellious Hammerhead will kill the Ruthless Raider and live. It will also be able to kill Fet's Fire Spray and live. So I can see a world where you include this card like as your top end space in Sabine, and it just like works and kind of just performs really, really well. Don't sleep on Rebellious Hammerhead. A lot of people are just saying that this is like a draft card. I think there might be some potential here. The Rebel trait is extremely big, and the ECL potential is huge with this card. 3 stars. Next up is the Profundity. 9 cost, 8/9 Rebel Vehicle Capital Ship with Overwhelm, and then when played and when defeated, you get to choose a player, they discard a card from their hand, and if they have more cards in their hand after they have discarded, they discard 1 more. So when you play this card against control, typically they're going to have more cards than you, so when you play it, they discard 2 cards from hand. Then they're going to have to use a card to deal with the Profundity. Then they have to discard probably 1 more card. So against control, this 1 card, it can kind of make your opponent lose 4 cards, which is really, really damn good. We have 2 mid-range red-blue hero decks. There's an Anakin blue deck and a Yoda red deck that's been running around. In those decks, I think the Profundity is a like 2 of in the sideboard, just because it gives them a tool to actually combat hard control decks. I really don't see this as a main board card against a lot of decks like aggro decks or mid-range decks. This is like a when played, when defeated, discard 2 cards, but you also get a big ship with it, which is kind of cool. I can see this being run in like the sideboard of mid-range to control decks in Red Hero. And I do think Yoda Red, I think Poe Green, and I think Anakin Blue all might consider this card. But I think they only consider it sideboard only, so I'm only giving it 2 stars. If control runs rampant, this card can actually like really, really shine in Red Hero. So we'll see. 2 stars. The next card is They Hate That Ship. So 1 cost, event, innate. It doesn't have any synergies. You create 2 TIE Fighter tokens for your opponent, and then you get to play a vehicle from your hand, and it costs 3 less. This is a 2 resource discount on a vehicle. And we have seen a similar effect be really, really good in Triple Dark Raid. Triple Dark Raid is really, really good because you get to dig 10 cards deep in your deck, find the card you want, play it, it comes in ready, it attacks, it does its when play triggers, and then it comes back to hand. So you essentially drew a really good card, and you got to do some damage with it. And it's notoriously really, really good in Django. The downside of Triple Dark Raid is, 1, you can miss and not hit your big Ruthless Raiders or Fet's Fire Sprays. And the other issue is that you kind of don't gain tempo, you just gain a lot of damage because the card comes back to hand. Well, with They Hate That Ship, it's a little different. The card doesn't come in ready. You can play this earlier than Triple Dark Raid, and the card stays on the field. And you give your opponent 2 TIE Fighter tokens, which is like not great, especially against Django, because they can use the TIE Fighters to exhaust your stuff, and they can also use the tokens to like ping a unit and then Tarkin Town it. And we know that Triple Dark Raid is a 5-star card, and it's really, really good. I think a lot of people are sleeping on They Hate That Ship. In a lot of deck guides and deck building and all this stuff that I'm looking at, people are just saying that, yeah, this is a good card, I don't know what decks can run it. And I've also seen people saying that like Kaz Yellow is just by far and away the best other color to run with Kaz. And I kind of disagree. They might be right, but I think they haven't really dug into how insane They Hate That Ship can be in Kaz. So let's talk about it. The key component here is that Kaz flips on 4 resources, and the majority of the cards in Kaz's deck are going to be 2, 3, and 4 cost cards, with probably a lot of them being 3 cost cards. And on 4 resources, They Hate That Ship allows you to play 6 resources worth of cards. I can see that Kaz has, let's say, 1 unit on the field ready to attack. So he does his leader ability, he attacks with the ship, whatever it is, it does 3 to 4 damage. And then on your next action, you can play like AT Hauler from your hand, and you have 1 readied resource. Now, you can play They Hate That Ship from your hand, playing Millennium Falcon from set 1, it comes in ready, then you can pilot it with Kaz, and you deal 6 damage to base. If they killed the unit that was on board, now you have a 4-5 and a 6-7 leader on the board, and you got to deal 9 damage on that turn. Yes, they have 2 TIE Fighter tokens. Who knows what they did with it? I mean, that's a really big turn for your aggressive leader. And it kind of makes up for the whole fact that, like in Sabine, why Sabine is really good is because you've given yourself another unit. Like you've essentially got to play 2 units really early on in the game. And that's a very huge tempo swing. That is why Sabine is insane. Her just being a, essentially a 3-5 unit on turn 3 is just insane. This allows you to get kind of, at worst, probably something like a 5-6 unit on turn 3, in addition to another unit that you were already going to play. So that's insane. And you can also run that in Sabine, because you could also play a 3-cost ground unit and then play like a 3-cost vehicle with They Hate That Ship. The only problem is you need the card in hand, you're not digging for it and drawing it. So that is a downside. So that alone, I think, should improve both Sabine and makes Kaz Red like a contender against Kaz Yellow. But there's more things we can do with They Hate That Ship. Next, well, what is one of the downsides of They Hate That Ship? You're giving your opponent 2 TIE Fighter tokens. Well, noticeably, the 2 TIE Fighter tokens are given to your opponent first. You can then play War Juggernaut on turn 4 and kill both of those TIE Fighter tokens. So you got to play a 4-cost, 3-7, deal 1 damage to any number of units. And War Juggernaut can also damage itself, so it could be a 4-6, which is the Ruthless Raider stat lines, and it stays on the field. And then you can pilot the War Juggernaut with Kaz like on your next turn if you wanted to, like to make sure that it doesn't like get confiscated as easily or whatever. I think that's also just incredibly insane. The last thing that you can do that's insane is if you are in space with Kaz, your opponent probably is playing space units to try and counter you. If your opponent has a single space unit, just 1 space unit, if you play They Hate That Ship and the home 1 unit from this set, you can ambush into a unit on 4 resources. So if, let's say that you're in space and your opponent is trying to block you and they go, well, I need something here, I'm going to play Bright Hope down. And now at least this turn, you're going to have to deal 6 damage to Bright Hope, and I might buy myself some tempo. I can play They Hate That Ship, home 1 in, ambush and kill Bright Hope, and now you have a 7-6 unit on the board, as well as maybe whatever your turn 2 play was. And then you can pilot something with Kaz or put him on the floor or wait till next turn to pilot him on home 1 so he doesn't get confiscated or whatever. I just think this card is insane, and that's just 3 scenarios that I can just quickly think of off the top of my head. Now, this also doesn't have to be run in Kaz. You can run this in Sabine Yellow. It does something similar where you play They Hate That Ship and you can run like the same kind of stuff. I think They Hate That Ship might even make Sabine start running more vehicles, because in Sabine, you can run red 3s, you can run blue leaders, you can even run red 5. Do not sleep on They Hate That Ship. This is easily a 5-star card, and I think this is one of the cards that makes Kaz Red on par or maybe even better than Kaz Yellow. And lastly, Trench Run. It's a gambit, and you attack with a fighter unit. For this attack, it gets +4/+0 and gains the on attack. Discard 2 cards from the defending player's deck and deal unpreventable damage equal to the difference in discarded cards to the unit. So The problem with Trench Run is the on attack ability can kill the unit before it actually does the damage for the attack. That's why it's kind of a gambit. Well, in Kaz, you can use Kaz's leader ability to blank a unit and then play Trench Run from your hand to attack with the fighter that you just blanked. It can't gain new abilities. The devs confirmed that, even though Kaz's card text doesn't say that. And then attack, you get the +4/+0 because that's not an ability, but you don't gain the on attack ability. So it's a 1 cost +4 on a fighter. I initially thought this card was a 5-star card because I just couldn't imagine a 1 cost +4/+0. We already see Surprise Strike seeing play, and it's insane. This in Kaz is just a better Surprise Strike, more damage, less resources. I've cooled on it a lot because it only works on fighters, and there's a chance that Kaz Red doesn't currently have enough fighters. So in the Kaz Red deck that I have put together, I only have 16 fighters in it. And is that reliable enough? It is a thermal oscillator base, so it only has 16 fighters in it. I haven't got to test if that's reliable enough yet. The deck also includes They Hate That Ship and a couple other cards that like Carabas hasn't implemented yet, so I haven't been able to fully test it out. We'll see. If there's enough fighters, Trench Run is going to be insane. It's just, is there going to be enough fighters to be able to be run? Outside of Kaz, like in a Poe green deck, playing like the Luke unit and the Chewie unit, your fighters may just have enough health that you could get this off, but I still don't know if you run these in decks outside of Kaz. So I've cooled on it. I originally thought it was 5 stars. I've cooled on it all the way down to 3 stars. We'll just see how it plays out. All right, and finally on to the roundup. So we've got about 5 playable cards in Red Hero. One of the best cards in the set, in my opinion, with They Hate That Ship. I think Red 5 is a solid 4-star card. It's going to be really, really good in a significant number of decks. And then you've got Black 1, Rebellious Hammerhead, and Trench Run, those will all make appearances in different decks. Rebellious Hammerhead and Black 1 in like a Poe or Sabine ECL deck, you could see those. Trench Run, you'll see in Kaz Red. And then I think the Profundity is another card that's like playable, but we'll have to see how Control does this set. BB-8 and Biggs Darklighter, 2 cards to really keep your eye on for the future. And with that, thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. My next video is going to be a deck walkthrough for the Kaz Red deck that you saw here today. I want to do like a little change of pace, and then I'll get back to the card reviews because I really do want to get all the cards reviewed for March 14th. Ideally before Saturday, but that's realistically probably not going to happen, but we'll see. So again, thank you so much for watching, and see ya.